do. Do. I'm raising you 5.
Take it away, Bailey.
It's Tombigbee time.
Tombigbee.
Tombigbee. Sorry, everybody. We're a little delirious.
It's at the end of a long week.
Very long week.
But we were just reminiscing over how awesome Tori singing Tombigbee on tour was.
Yeah, it was a staple over the Ocean to Ocean tour. And it's funny because it's not one that I felt resonates with me so much, and because we just don't have that kind of same cultural connection.
To the Trail of Tears.
Yes, for all that we have our own kind of similar, sister wounds in our country.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner.
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
The podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers, it's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient,
Always patient.
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America.
That's 33 states in 55 days.
To connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions: how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerp.net.
But seeing how passionate everyone gets in the tours about that song rocks.
But also the moment when she's like, you raised me 20, I raised you 5, and she holds up her hand to show 500 treaties down by your father's lies. It's a very dramatic moment in the song too. It's very easy to get swept up in.
Which is funny because when you listen to the track, it's not really a moment,
No, it does.
But
It does hide itself a bit more in the actual song, but she really hammed it up.
It's a whole thing
on the stage.
Oh, she's been sighted. Did you see this? She's been spotted around Los Angeles, I think, or was it New York?
Goodness, wasn't that a dramatic? And then more than the sightings, I liked the commentary going on behind the scenes of people like critiquing the sighting and calling it a fraud, but the fervent vigor with which we were desperate for more information. And I'm like, people, this is just a lady going about her business.
Yeah. Gosh.
And then there was that photo shared from Tash's Instagram account of like them eating pizza, and someone was like, there, Tori's hands. And
what does this mean?
But like, what I kept on thinking was, if they're Tori's hands, then whoever is sitting to Tori's left is wearing an Under the Pink t-shirt. And I'm just like, is that like a little overkill? You're going out for lunch with Tori, so you put on your merch.
Like we wouldn't do it. Maybe.
No, I'm genuinely asking, is that overkill? I need to know for the future when I get to have lunch. When you get to
eat pizza with her, yeah. Do you remember when she did that big auction and like auctioned off like a meeting with her?
I would spend money on that.
Yeah. It was a lot of money to enter into that auction, yeah. For that prize was massive.
Well, it's funny because just last weekend, at the time of recording, I was at Supernova, which is a Comic-Con, like pop culture style convention in Sydney. I'd flown up to be an author on a couple of panels for that, and I was metaphorically chained to a desk for the entire weekend to sign books for whoever happened to walk past. And I say that with a bit of glibness because for the first hour and a half, I literally spoke to no one. Yeah. And but, it was great by the end of the weekend. And I had some incredible interactions, including this one teenage trans boy who was just jumping on the balls of his feet with excitement at the prospect of meeting me because he loved Kindred so much, and then was beside himself that he could buy a Vast because it's trans pirates. Just the fact that he was able to buy trans representation, he was so excited, and it was so beautiful. And then when he stepped away to sort of compose himself after the interaction had happened, his sister, who's probably all of like 14 herself, stepped up to the counter and said, "I just want to say thank you for making my brother so happy."
Oh.
And it was also heartwarming and wholesome. And I'm like, well, that was worth it. The entire weekend was worth it for that.
100%.
But there were a couple of other lovely interactions with people too. But as part of that conversation, as part of that weekend, I had a conversation with someone about how much would you spend to like meet someone that you really like, because at Comic-Cons and pop culture conventions, people do spend a lot of money to interact with people they idolize, or as one patron put it, "I've got to go for my 3-second hugs now." And I said, "What do you mean 3-second hugs?" And she's like, "Oh, I've got tickets for like meeting stars, and you get your 3-second hug, you pose for a photo, and then you get moved along." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess." And like sometimes people are paying $75 a pop or more for that kind of interaction. And then the question was posed, is there anyone you would pay that money for? And I was like, Tori, I would like probably pay more money.
I would pay money for meet and greets if,
Yeah.
like, and this just reminds me, you know, anyone who's listened to this who doesn't know sort of Tori that in depth, it's different now since COVID, and I think since a few other things that have gone on in her life. But Tori used to run meet and greets before almost every, you know, most shows for free.
Yeah.
It was a matter of lining up in the morning, and you stayed there as long as it took until she'd done sound check, and she'd come out for, you know, hours. And it wasn't just like a 3-second hug and get shoved along. She would sign stuff, she would talk to you, she'd engage with you, a lot of people she remembered, and it was her chance to catch up with people. And it's just so unfathomably generous, considering she's been doing this for decades. And it only stopped in the, you know, for the Ocean to Ocean tour when she decided to start doing video, and she still does them. They're just video meet and greets. And I have no doubt that she watches all those videos and engages with all the gifts that are given to her, you know.
And letters that get handed over at those things will either she will read herself, or she will have them read aloud to her while she's having makeup done or whatever before the show or on the tour. So like she still has an incredible level of engagement with her audience, which is funny. I've just this week been listening to the audiobook of a book called Under the Ivy, which is an unauthorized biography of Kate Bush. And comparatively, like how reclusive and separate Kate has kept herself from her fans. They're such different women in how they conduct themselves with their listening audience. That was interesting to just take note of that very big contrast.
I've had regular conversations with people who feel a certain way about Taylor Swift, and I will never ever judge Taylor Swift fans. I'll never judge Swifties for the lengths they go to, because, you know, how much would I spend? Well, I've spent thousands of dollars. In 2017, when I went to the Native Invader tour, that was a $2,000 round trip, and I didn't do a meet and greet for that trip, but I went there to see her perform live. I flew to LA. That's in the minds of a lot of people who aren't our people.
Yeah.
That is...
I love how you say that was a $2,000 round trip. Hey, remember the $55,000?
Well, that's a whole other thing. But like, we didn't just go to see her, I suppose, is why I picked the Native Invader example. But yeah, we did spend thousands and thousands of dollars to engage with her and engage with her community. And I know we were talking before we did the episode about nerds and geeks and whether these words are still, you know,
because
slurs in...
I have never been to a Supernova or a Comic-Con before, and it's the type of place where people do cosplay. They come dressed up in whatever outfit or character that they're like feeling at the moment, or feel like they can pull off in a good way. And so I said to a few people, like, the level of nerd is like Olympic level. And I mean that as a compliment. I feel awed and humbled by how vehemently these people lean into their fandom and just love what they do. Yeah. And I'm not here to critique that on any level. It was just sort of my first time witnessing it firsthand.
Well, it's that thing because we are, by definition, nerds, the two of us.
Yeah.
Huge Tori Amos nerds.
Absolutely.
I, gladly call myself a Beauty and the Beast nerd. I have a collection of paraphernalia. I'm going to the musical opening this evening. Like, people send me shit, like, because they know how much that sort of movie means to me.
Yeah.
And how specific my attachment is. So yeah, I can't think of nerd as a slur or any kind of judgment, negative judgment, because for me, it's a celebration of having a special interest.
And the people who are too cool for school and don't want to be seen as a nerd, I just see you as missing out on so much joy in life.
Bland.
Because that's all nerds are. They're finding their joy and they're seeking it out wholeheartedly. 100%. And so whatever form that takes. Of course, there's people dressed as recognizable characters. There was a guy there who I honestly thought was...
Sailor Moon.
No, not Sailor Moon. Willy Wonka. Like, he looked exactly like Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
As a person. And so then to have him in a Willy Wonka outfit, the song,
Pure Imagination.
Yeah, Pure Imagination instantly popped into my head. And I'm like, that visual recall was just so strong. But then these two girls were talking to me for a time and they were dressed in the most gorgeous sort of fantasy mushroom witch kind of outfits. And I was like, so who are you dressed as? And they're, my character from D&D. And I'm like, that's even better. Like, yeah. I feel like that's even more creativity in that you own this character to a level that you're not sort of homaging someone else, which is also a valid form of art. But the fact that it's all them.
Thriving in the character you created. Yeah, it's
exactly
cool.
I love it.
Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool to me. It is someone who sort of doesn't give a stuff about what society has to say or thinks, and who just pursues their passion, with their full investment of their heart and resources. What's cooler than that? Cool is setting yourself apart and being interesting and being worthy of sort of people following in your example. Like, that's what that is. So
how have you creatively pursued your nerddom in the last week or so?
My nerddom, I've just, speaking to my Beauty and the Beast nerddom, the musical's opening tonight. I've been organising my cosplay outfit, which you've got to be really careful about because Disney are very serious about how you cosplay. So there are a few elements I'm putting into my look that are going to sort of help me distinguish that it's not a cosplay and it's very much a tribute. But I've been focused about nothing else all week and I've been very, very stressed about the whole experience. I'm going with a very, very dear friend of mine as her +1. It's going to be awesome. But in terms of pursuing my creative practice, this week's been a bit tough. I was in a rear-end collision earlier this week and...
Not the fun kind.
No. No. The one that kind of makes you panicked about driving and brings up a lot of really horrible memories about losing a family member in a car accident. For better or worse, it absolutely inspired me to get back into a particular poem that I'd talked about last week that I kind of had talked about doing, kind of been inspired by our discussion about Seaside and some of the sort of trip things that brought up. Kind of brought those things in and finally sat down with it and finished it. So that poem is now ready for sort of final draft. Yeah, it's obviously final draft now. It'll go through, it sort of sits in a different folder for my, the way I like to do it is I like to sort of have things at different levels. So once a poem is in what I feel is final draft form, it goes into a separate place with all the other final drafts, and then those all get edited together. So then I can make sure that I feel the collection is holistically put together and it's been edited with the same kind of energy and skill and with the same kind of lens. Whereas if I just kind of go, that's finished, I've had that experience in the past where poems just kind of seem quite undercooked because they weren't edited at the same time to finality as everything. I thought I might read it.
Yeah, if you want. Why not?
Bear in mind, it's obviously a little
Work
bit...
in progress?
Yes, yeah. Final draft stage. Bear in mind for you listening, if anyone's sort of got, anything around grief, it might be a little intense. You've got a fast car. She's got a camo cap and a brother to see. And just like me, she never did. And just like you, she never made it home. Laura's memorial is in Rice, California. Only 30 minutes more she would have made it to Arizona. I think most people have forgotten her, but her place is still swarming with shoes. The makeshift fences and trees and pits are covered with them, smothered by them. Sneaks, stocks, boots, connies, jellies, high tops, flip-flops, Laura loved shoes. Don't know how she felt about graffiti, burned out mattresses and bottles and needles. She was only young, fast asleep in the passenger seat, just like you. Given my time again, I would be sure to invest a moment or two's more pause on the other side of that curtain. Gift myself a second, a breath, before taking that last step to the side of you shattering every hope I had. Before I had to crumple down to nick my hands on the glass in your chin, and the way touching your knees made me cry. The constellation of freckles on your chest, and the way I couldn't tell where I blended and you ended, until you did. If I could go back to that moment and speak to myself, I'd say, honey, wait. Whatever iota of time you can take now, take. Because whatever in this window you waste, without it, it will all be, I'm afraid, too late. If I could have you back for just one day, I warn you now I would scream your name so loud. If I could, I'd spend it just sitting in your shade. Refresh my memory of how you fill out my embrace. And when you look at your watch, I'll say, stay past sunset. I would beg myself hoarse. A funny thing has happened to my happiness. There's a fault line in it, an atrophy. I feel it every day on these adventures, where I wear your memory on every step I strike like shoes. Every good thing, every stroke of luck, every serendipity, I reach a level of joy that catches on losing you. A hiccup of sorrow, a yanking. So I take that extra second to remember how lucky I am to live, to travel, to age, to discover, to remember all the ways you're with me, and my joy reaches an even higher peak. You exist in my life now as that zenith.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, working on it.
Yay, poetry.
Yeah, poems.
We do love a poem.
We do love a poem. I mean, between the last time we recorded, I did some performances with Mama Alto, who's an incredible cabaret performer here in Naarm and around the world. Did a special Pride tea party that Michael came along to on the Sunday along with Teague. And
That was wonderful too.
that was wonderful.
Bailey getting up there and making me cry.
But yeah, I invited Michael to make a request. And so I read a poem for them, which was lovely. And it's funny because it's a poem that I've not thought about doing live because it's a poem about my relationship with men. And I never knew how that one was going to go down, but the fact that it kind of really, I felt like it landed really well.
I feel like it did too. There were a lot of people wiping their eyes. Yeah. But for me, as a reader or listener of that poem, it's not, well, particularly as a non-binary person, I don't feel like you're necessarily directing it to me, but you're also not.
Yeah.
I feel like I float somewhere between the narrating voice and the receptive voice. And that is a beautiful tension as well.
Yeah, wow.
So it's such a powerful poem as far as I'm concerned. Because when I was reading your collection and I got to one called Dear Men, I was like, oh, here we go.
Oh, here she goes.
She's just gonna start ripping men to shreds, and it's not that at all. It's really not. It's seeing all the moments of beauty and love and gentleness and power mixed in with the opportunities for more.
Yeah.
And So yeah, it's wonderful.
What a beautiful take. Thank you very much. You can buy it now on Amazon. Legit, if you're a Melbourne listener, by the way, I believe Book and Paper in Williamstown still have a couple of copies. There are also a couple at Neighbourhood Books in Westgarth and Avenue Bookstore in Richmond and South Melbourne.
Amazing.
Or you can jump on Amazon and purchase it. Links on my Instagram if you're someone who follows me. And if you're not, go follow me and then you can find the link.
I have done no work on my memoir since the last episode recorded, but that was for a few reasons. I had a lot of other things on my plate, like traveling to Sydney, and then immediately, like I got home from Sydney at midnight on Sunday evening, and by 2:00 on the Monday, I was back at the airport going to Tassie for work.
Yeah.
So it was just go, go, go.
Yeah.
But I had a few other things that I needed to get done, and so now I feel like I'm clearing my workload a bit in order to be able to dive in again. I also know that in about 2 weeks' time I will start receiving, I am a judge for the Lord Mayor of Melbourne's Creative Writing Prize.
Look at you.
And I feel like, oh, what have I signed up for? Because I think over a 2-week to a month-ish time frame, I'll have to read like 80 to 100 short stories and poems and
Good grief.
and judge them as to which are the ones worthy of the shortlist and the first place and all that jazz. So I know I've got a lot of reading commitments coming up, so I think in the next 2 weeks I want to like make as much use of not having that as a thing that I need to do.
Well, I mean, that's handy because I've got the next 2 weeks off. Let's do creative night.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. Because, I've got, my plan is to do a lot of writing expeditions. The way I write best, or the way that I kind of help collate best, is if I'm in transit. So I like to go on really long drives, and that kind of really helps me kind of, but I've got to do a lot of homework before that so that I've got everything kind of in a box in my brain, so that while I'm driving or, going for like a nature walk, that like my brain, the back end of my brain is processing through the box of what I have. So I've kind of got to do a big sort of starting night to get things all together and then start doing those expeditions over the next couple of weeks. But going back to Tombigbee for just a second, obviously the tour was a big sort of memory, but were there any other sort of memories of the trip that kind of speak to the song for you?
No, I mean the ones that you've talked about, which you're about to talk about, I wasn't present for.
No.
And so other than, say, the mounds in Georgia.
Oh gosh,
that
that was a day.
It was so surreal to see this sort of, I don't know, memorialized kind of traditional mounds, but then, I don't know, it just felt like it had been touristied up at the same time. It was an interesting...
And it's a burial ground. Like, it's a... So I don't know, there was something really wrong. I remember feeling really wrong about being there.
Yeah.
Especially, they've built all these stairs into the sides of them so you can go running along the tops. And, there was chocolate and chip wrappers and, crap, it just was... And you had to, go for quite a walk to get toward them. It's stunning country, but something about it just felt really perverted or really inappropriate.
And then it's not directly related, but on some level it is. When we visited Plymouth Rock, the rock itself was in this cage, and it was tiny and really underwhelming. And then you read that it's because for a long time they just left a pickaxe there, and you could literally chip yourself off a fragment of Plymouth Rock and keep it as a souvenir. And it just struck me as being the most insensitive to the land while simultaneously selfish in the something doesn't exist unless I possess it side of things. I guess that mindset is what led to and contributed to, like...
Yeah. I remember when we went there, and we also, there's this sort of over Plymouth Rock, sort of, it's like near the sort of water, but there's also like a hill at the top of which is this incredibly powerful sort of statue of a native man. Do you remember this? And it's massive.
Yeah.
I remember going, this is the thing.
Yeah.
Sadly I don't remember the name. We didn't sort of, this is kind of off the cuff, but
we only stopped there for like half hour for the whole thing too. So.
Yeah, well, I think we both were pretty, disillusioned by the whole kind of point. But yeah, I mean, when Teague and I were driving through sort of Arizona and New Mexico and into Texas, there were a lot of sort of places that felt very Tombigbee-esque around, seeing a lot of posters about missing and murdered Indigenous women, posters of women themselves, but also posters of the campaign that were sort of being held. And there were some really horrific sort of racist billboards around the place as well. It's just quite dire. But suddenly, the other thing that came to mind, do you remember when we got up to sort of Montana and we stayed in a teepee?
Yeah.
Which I remember we felt kind of conflicted about, because we were like, oh, is this really inappropriate?
The novelty of it was fun, but at the same time we were really questioning whether the owners of the establishment should have had it up. It was an odd situation.
Yeah, it was strange. And when Dig and I got to Albuquerque, we got there very, very late at night, and because all of our accommodation had to change when Michael got sick with COVID, we ended up staying. I think I've told this story on the first season. We ended up staying with friends of Michael's parents who are missionaries, living in this incredibly huge property. They were lovely. It was a very bizarre kind of, situation to be in after we'd spent literally one night in this trashed, horrific motel in the middle of nowhere, that barely had a working microwave, and it was gross. And then the next night we had our own wing of this house. It was just wild. But I remember having a conversation with them in the morning about a proposal that had been had to put a McDonald's at the base of the Grand Canyon and put almost like a ski lift in it. And how... there's a lot of, as you drive through sort of middle America, there's a lot of advertisements for casinos that are kind of, put on reservations, and ways for those reservations to make money. And kind of going, there's a lot of exploitation of the Native American communities now because they need money to survive. And there's all these sort of enterprises going in there trying to convince landowner groups to kind of sell their souls and sell out their spirituality and sell out their connection to country in order to survive. And so all these casinos are going up, fast food joints, all these different weed shops and all these enterprises. But the justification is there of like, oh no, we consulted the land council and the land council said yes, as though the land council are an accurate sort of representation of the community in the area and are an accurate reflection of the community's best interests in trying to preserve culture. And those elements were really startling to come across, in those parts of the drive that weren't sort of in the cities.
Yeah.
And weren't kind of in the more populated areas. Once you sort of got into the deserts, it's a very different energy, and you're getting very different messages. And I don't know, thinking about this song really has brought back a lot of those memories for me.
Yeah. So do you have songs to swap
I do.
with this one?
The first one I wanted to bring up is a song called Spawn by an Australian band called George.
Spectacular.
It is an incredible, incredible piece of music. And sort of the main chorus lyric is, "From where does fear spawn? From the older ingrained scorn." It's all kind of about, each year I peel back my skin and fleshy pink appears. Like it's very, you can sort of look at it in the macrocosm of race, and you can look at it as sort of, intergenerational trauma, which I feel is really pertinent to this. That was one of mine. And the other one is a song called Hins Hall by Macklemore. It's kind of taken on a lot of popularity this year because it was really the first and I would say the only, sort of major recording artist to release a song directly about the genocide in Palestine. And obviously Tombigbee is essentially, it's really well crafted lyrically, but it is about the Trail of Tears. It is about a genocide of Native peoples. And I thought, well, what better song to kind of, reflect that than one that is being used now. And there's big campaigns to kind of proliferate this song around the place so that, more awareness is brought up. And I believe that, a bunch of the profits from the song are being donated to causes, to help, people in that region. So those were my two. What were your two?
Perhaps obviously for Australians that grew up in the 80s and 90s, Treaty by Yothu Yindi came to mind, which is just a really powerful call for a treaty with the First Nations of this country, which still isn't the case.
We're nowhere near it.
Yes, and
it's also just an undefeatable banger.
Yeah, it has such a driving beat.
It's something that, rightly or wrongly, I have a very, very visceral memory of being at a closet party at the Gasso, and where everyone's kind of dotted around the place, and everyone's a little drunk, and everyone's a little bit silly on bits and pieces. And next thing, Treaty starts blasting across the venue, and the energy that it drove and sort of the tidal magnetic force just kind of zoomed in. It was Aquarius, who was the DJ at the time, through every single person at that party. No one was anywhere but in that room, absolutely losing our heads to Treaty and singing and screaming for it. And it was just such an indicator of the power of that song and the cultural legacy of that song, that it speaks so deeply to our spirits, that I think, all human spirits yearn for that kind of reconciliation to land, and we're just so lost. But there's something in us that connects so deeply to, the sound of those didgeridoos and the clapsticks, and and the vocal and the sort of very direct call for something. It was not, it wasn't masked in pretty lyrics. It was literally the lyrics are treaty, treaty now.
So I thought that was very
great call.
Pertinent. And then another one I found was Kill Your Mama by Alicia Keys.
I'm not familiar with this one.
I was less familiar with it than The Diary of Alicia Keys, per se. But on first listen, just really connected with it, in that it basically, the gist of the lyrics are, how are you going to survive if you kill your mama? And as in Mother Nature. One of the lyrics says you will have a premature apocalypse because of the greed and the taking.
Wow.
And so perhaps a slightly more environmental leaning of it, but it certainly looks at the relationship
But it's
between
one and the same,
humans and land.
All Indigenous people, are of the understanding that they're children of the earth.
Yes.
So, it is...
Precisely.
This, I just realised this is from the album Here, which is incredible album. I was obsessed with this for ages.
So you probably have heard it then.
I reckon I have, but I'm trying to think of the one, because In Common is a song on this album that I love. And there's another one that I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, She Don't Really Care, _One Love. The song I was obsessed with for ages. So yeah, this is a really good album to get your head wrapped around.
But other than that brings us to the episode of the third episode of season 2. I got there in the end.
You did. I love that we forget so often that we're Aquarians. So we're like, we'll just do a quick 20-minute episode, blah.
Oh.
It's just not feasible. But I think we've still managed to keep this at under 45.
Yeah, but also we just sit down to talk to each other, and we've been talking to each other for 6 years now, and still find things to not talk
talking
about.
To each other. Or not talk about it.
We talk.
Maybe
we
like
both
soup.
like soup. We both like soup.
We met in a coffee, in a Starbucks. Not that Starbucks.
Anyway.
I have an idea for the next one.
Yes.
How would you feel if we did a bit of a we'll just start, and I'll go Hidden Treasures on my phone, I'll hit shuffle, and whatever that song is, we'll just do that song.
As long as it's one of the remaining 3 tracks.
Well, yeah, we'll skip. Like, we'll like if it's
mean,
one of the ones we've already
5.
done, we can
There's 5
skip. But
tracks.
we'll let
yeah.
the
Yeah, so-
streaming gods decide.
And then we'll come up with all of our responses to it on the fly.
What could possibly go wrong?
I can't wait to see how it goes. Till then.
Bye.
The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.